Hi, my name is Dr. Karen Williams. I'm a consultant psychiatrist in Wollongong. I'm making a submission today based on my experiences working as a doctor with women traumatised by childhood and family abuse. I'll talk about coercive control, but first I will tell you a little bit about what drives me to advocate on this issue. See, it was never my goal to work in mental health. And to be honest, I was scared of the locked wards and sometimes aggressive patients. But we all do terms in different specialties and before we decide which specialty we want to do. So on my first day, they handed me a security alarm. It's a little bit like a walkie-talkie, and I was told I needed to make sure that the alarm was kept upright because it's designed to go off if you get knocked out or pinned down by a patient. I was also told to take out my long earrings in case a patient tried to yank them out of my ears, and not to wear a necklace or lanyard in case the patient tried to use it to choke me or themselves. I asked if the patients had to wear them. They don't. And I also asked if the wards had separate male and female beds, and they don't. They don't even have locks on the doors. So anyway, I'm rounding with my boss for the very first time, and the first patient that I ever have is a woman who came in the previous night after trying to kill herself. I don't really remember much about the interview, but there are some things that I do remember. What I remember is that it was only a few minutes long, and my boss asked her a few questions like, does she want to kill herself? And she said, kind of. And he asked her if she wanted to go home, and she said she wasn't ready. He told her, you can't live here. And she said, I know. And I remember she left the room crying. It was as simple as that, the interview. And he said, write that down. She's got borderline personality disorder. She wants to kill herself. She's impulsive. You get a feel for these kind of things. And then he called for the next patient. After the rounds, I went to the wards and I noticed her crying. And I sat with her and I asked her what was going on, why she had tried to kill herself. She told me that she and her boyfriend had been fighting and that he had told her to kill herself over and over again, and that he always did this. I had never actually ever heard of anyone telling another person to kill themselves. I have heard this plenty of times since. But I asked her why he said that, and she said it was because he hadn't wanted to have sex and that he had made her. And she had been crying afterwards, and he got angry at her for that and told her that she was pathetic and nuts and she should kill herself. I remember crying with her, and I asked her if she had told anyone in the emergency department about it. And she said no, that she hadn't. And when I asked her why she didn't, she said, well, no one else really asked about it. She was scared on the ward, and she was scared of the men. She was scared of the noises and the occasional violence. And I was scared too, as a new doctor there on that ward. And I think, is there any surprise that a woman who has been abused would be scared in an environment like that? But it is telling, isn't it, that even though she was scared on the ward, she still preferred to stay there than go home. I look back on that incident now and I can't believe I was really that naive. But I went to the boss and I thought that I had news for him. I said, you know, that lady we had, that first one, she's being abused. She's in a really bad relationship. She was raped last night by him. That's why she wanted to kill herself. She doesn't have borderline personality disorder. And he said, yes, she does. All of that's just coincidence. A lot of women in this area come from families like that, and borderlines attract that kind of behaviour. They're very chaotic. So remember, I'd only been a doctor for 12 weeks. I was in my early 20s, and this old white doctor spoke with so much authority that I thought he must know something that I don't know, and there was no room to argue. But what happens here is that we have a woman who's in an abusive relationship, who's told she's crazy, she should kill herself, and ends up on a psychiatric unit, held against her will, where she is diagnosed as mentally ill. Her file says she has a personality disorder. I didn't say anything to her that I thought maybe the boss could be wrong, and she didn't argue either. She accepted being told that she was mentally ill. So did I. She did want to die. She was too scared to go home, and she had told the truth. And she was ultimately shown by our health system, by her doctors, the people that we should trust, that she is the cause of the problems. She was given medications. I don't remember what they were, and I don't know what happened to her. But years after working in this field now, I know that if she wanted to leave him, that if she had kids and had needed to escape him, the family law court will talk about this incident and very likely use it against her. They would say that she's crazy. Here's the proof in the medical records. He would say she was crazy. If she cries or faints on the stand, she will be called an unreliable witness, and he will get the kids. So I want everyone here to know that this is not a one-off case. I want everyone here to know that I see cases like this when I'm at work every single day. Literally every day. There won't be a single day that goes by where I do not speak to a woman who has been diagnosed with a mental illness such as depression, anxiety, borderline personality disorder, where she does not have a history of current or previous abuse, and that no one has asked them about that abuse. They come in believing that they're crazy, they're nuts, they're mentally ill. They seek help themselves, or their partners bring them in. And they come to us and say, I feel like I want to die. I'm sad, I'm angry, anxious. And we say that you have this illness. When we diagnose her, we are effectively agreeing with him, though, aren't we? There is a huge population of women out there that believe they have mental illness like depression and anxiety because of chemicals and genetics. They need medication to be fixed. They don't recognise, and we don't recognise, that these symptoms are caused directly by coercive control and other types of violence. So in case you were wondering about whether what I'm saying could really be true, how could I possibly see this every day? You've got to remember that 1/4 of Australian women will experience domestic violence, and more than half of those will be diagnosed with a mental illness. And 43% will be diagnosed during the relationship, and 44% will be diagnosed after the relationship. Only 12% will have a diagnosis prior to the relationship. So that first patient that I spoke about, she would belong in the first group, where she was given a diagnosis of a mental illness during a relationship that was violent, less than 24 hours after being raped. The sole reason that women accept that they have a mental illness is because of the concept of coercive control. Coercive control is a type of abuse that is actually designed to make you feel both stupid and crazy. It's designed to destroy your sense of self. And we live in a society where we join the side of the abuser and we facilitate his claims that she is mentally ill whenever we don't recognise or criminalise coercive control. For every day that we as Australians don't talk about coercive control, every day we don't criminalise it, we allow doctors to be blind to it, we allow lawyers to be blind to it, and we allow police to be blind to it. We allow our children to be blind to it. And we let perpetrators continue to use this form of psychological torture, because that's what it is, unfettered. We allow women to continue to be abused, to be killed, to be injured, to spend the rest of their lives feeling like they're mentally ill, thinking they need medication to treat their personality, and we allow children to be given to abusers who convince the court that she is mad. I do believe that criminalising coercive control is the action that needs to happen to force us to start looking at it. We've already been talking about coercive control a long time, but it was only when the action of criminalisation happened that suddenly people are talking about it. I work in New South Wales, and we had an inquiry into coercive control earlier this year. We've had a lot of opposition here too. Suddenly, people are interested in talking about it. So if you understand what coercive control is all about, there can be no reason to allow it to continue as a legal form of abuse. The Honourable Mark Latham, he suddenly had an opinion on coercive control, and he found time to put a submission into the New South Wales inquiry. The irony of his opening statement was not lost on me. The Englishman's home is his castle. The Englishman, his castle. He talks about this legislation and how it threatens many aspects of regular behaviour in the family home, aspects of private life, extending the reach of the state into private homes and private relationships. What Mark Latham reveals in that statement alone is a real admission that currently what happens in the home is private. What happens in the home is currently out of reach by the law. After reading his submission, I was glad he put it in because he single-handedly made the argument for us. Mark clearly does not understand coercive control, and I wanted to make sure that everyone here knows more than the definitions, but how it presents in women. So what exactly is coercive control? What does it look like? There are so many definitions there, and I find definitions boring. So let's just talk about what it looks like in a relationship. Many of us have heard of the terms, such as love bombing, isolation, humiliation, but I'll focus on the purpose of these strategies. So that first one, love bombing. We'll talk about that first because that's what happens first. Love bombing is the process which draws the woman in. It's a promise, it's a potential of what the relationship could look like. In that phase, everything seems perfect, and he will lavish her with gifts and praise. It might seem odd, but it is also the time that he is setting the rules. I love how there is so much substance to you. You're so much different from your friends who just, want to go out and party all the time. You've got really good values. And the rule there is you won't be going out with your friends. They might say things like, you are so giving and generous. And the rule there is you will give to me. You will look after me, take care of my needs. You are so unlike my crazy ex-girlfriend. And the rule there is, you will not argue with me. You will not have opinions that are different from mine. So this phase is designed to make her feel like he really values her as a person, and she will feel really special, like he truly admires and appreciates her for who she is. But when she does the wrong thing from now on, she's going to feel like she's the disappointment. Love bombing is designed to create an impression that this is his normal baseline behavior, and anything negative that comes after that is a deviation from normal, but it's caused by her. Love bombing is not a once-only thing. It happens at the beginning, but then it happens at various times during the relationship too. The love bombing is the bit that helps her walk into the cage, like the cheese that draws in the mouse. So if you go with the mouse analogy, once the mouse is in the cage, what he doesn't want is her friends or family calling her out and saying, don't eat the cheese is bad, right? So he tends to get rid of the friends and the family that might do that. And this looks different in different stages. So there's a process of isolation, which can be really obvious and it can be less obvious. So the covert forms of isolation would be doing things like arranging a special date on the day that she plans to go out with her friends, or turning up at work to have in her lunch break so that she doesn't have relationships with her colleagues, or maybe picking a fight before she were to go out and make her cry so that then she ends up with a puffy face and chooses not to go out after that. And then there's really overt examples where he'll directly say, I don't want you seeing your parents. They're not good people. They're not supportive. Or casting a doubt on a sibling. Your brother is the favourite child, isn't he? Other examples are your friends. They don't like you. They're not good people. They don't trust them. They just want to break us up. Those kind of things. And then there are even greater extremes where they are told, her friends will be told things that, I don't want you talking to her, or I will hurt you. And so he might threaten her friends, he might threaten family, and make it that the friends choose to stay away because of that. So isolation serves the purpose of increasing her levels of anxiety and reducing her self-esteem and making her feel dependent and making her feel grateful and indebted to him. It keeps her focus on him and what he wants and makes her feel worthless. The other tactic that abusers use in coercive control is the use of threats. Ultimately, the abuser is afraid of rejection. He has to make her feel afraid to leave him. So he has to induce a fear. So it could be a fear of being killed, it could be a fear of being injured, or it could be a fear of your children being killed or injured or other family members. But there could also be fear of poverty, fear of not being able to manage or to support a family, saying things like no one would want you, no one would take you in, who would want to live with you? Or saying that you'll never be given the children, the court will give the children to me because you're crazy and, you can't look after them clearly. He wants to instill fear in her, so he'll do things like hurting pets or talking about unknown alliances, like, my friends, I've got friends who are bikies or gang members. I'll talk about having weapons. Whether or not that's true, that's not the point. It's that she doesn't know what he's quite capable of. He can cause her fear by making her feel that she might be ashamed of herself. You're embarrassing. You say so many stupid and embarrassing things. Or maybe create fear of her being alone. No one is ever going to love you. You are completely unlovable. Fear of having the children removed. So sometimes they might, make it look like she's hurt the children and make her believe that their children are going to be removed because of her. And also getting her involved in illegal activities so that she might be fearful of going to jail herself. Sometimes, and this is really frequent, he creates a fear that he's going to commit suicide. So he might make frequent suicidal gestures, and that his family or his friends may actually call her up and contact her whenever she tries to leave or tries to create a distance and say, he's suicidal, I need you to come look after him. But what he's trying to do is foster a sense of unpredictability, and you can do that by enforcing trivial demands as well. So that's another tactic as well, and it makes him seem really powerful. So it might be things like saying that the mashed potato has to be a particular way, has to be smooth and with no lumps in it, or that the tea must be a certain colour, or the food has to be cut at a certain angle, dinner has to be set at a certain time. So by enforcing those trivial rules, then she's constantly wondering if she's doing the wrong thing. The perpetrator has to be unpredictable to keep her busy, to keep her on her toes, to keep her in that fight or flight mode, so that she's constantly on high alert and constantly waiting for bad things to happen. And sometimes women will be left with that sense that something bad is about to happen for years, sometimes decades. The other technique that is used by abusers in coercive control is humiliation and degradation. And this is actually a strategy to isolate her. So apart from taking the family and friends away from her and telling her to keep away from them, he destroys her sense of self so that she doesn't believe that she's worthy to anybody else and that she should expect any more. So it can be hidden forms of degradation, like, I still love you even though, you're chubby. I don't need to worry about you going out because, your friends are 10 out of 10 and, you're not like that, but I love you anyway. I love that you would wear that outfit even though you don't really have the body for it. And then there's overt forms of abuse, such as, God, you're stupid, what's wrong with you? You're mad. You even say these things in public because you just embarrass yourself. God. Or making her write lines about how stupid she is. Making her beg for forgiveness, kiss his feet, kneel to him. It's this constant insults thrown in her face so that after she's heard it over and over again, she will actually believe it as well. Another technique that abusers use is inducing fatigue or debility. And the way that they might do that is by keeping her busy with chores, fighting with her all night so that she can't sleep. And the purpose of doing this is to increase her sense of vulnerability. So when you're being attacked, you need to be able to run away, right? You've got to either fight or flight the perpetrator. And if you can't fight or flight, and you're constantly in that mode of, whether you have to fight or flight, you will be constantly exhausted. And by doing this to someone, and you keep them like that in that fight or flight mode, you actually create sort of a disorder in that sense as well, and that will go on for years after the woman has left him. But the whole purpose of doing that is to make it really difficult for her to leave. The other way to keep her debilitated and fatigued is to keep her preoccupied. So keeping her busy with things so that she can't possibly plan an escape. Keep giving her lists of chores that will never end. Keeping her busy up all night. And that's, again, the writing the lines or writing out her list of flaws. And that way she's got all of these things to do all the time. She's too exhausted and her mind is occupied with keeping herself safe. She's not really going to be able to execute a plan of escape. The other technique that coercive controllers use is to demonstrate sort of these godlike qualities. It's a sense of omnipotence, and so he might do that by monitoring her whereabouts at all times, so he can say, I know where you've been, and monitor her bank statements, so he knows exactly what she's done, with where she's been, what money she's spent, and so simple things that look benign to everybody else, but to her she can tell. He might put flowers where she's been, so he's leaving a sign that he knows where she's been. Keeping tabs on everything that she's done, reading her emails, talking to her bosses, her friends, her family, and he will often win everybody over by being incredibly charming and endearing to all those around her, so that they will say to her, wow, he's amazing. And she feels crazy because that's not how he is to her. He stops her from working very frequently, or if she is working, doesn't allow her to have the access to the money. And stopping her working fulfills a number of goals for the abuser. So it reduces her contact with people, so she can't talk about what's happening at home. It keeps her more isolated, obviously, but takes away her ability, obviously, to leave financially. So the consequence of coercive control is that we've got to remember that the abuser wants to own her, he wants to see her as his property, and he feels entitled to her. And the purpose of coercive control is to trap her. It's the answer to why she stays in this relationship. It is the cause of the trauma bond that she has to her captor. So being bonded to an aggressor is a normal trauma response. Coercive control is about taking advantage of the trauma response for your own benefit. When police and when those in the legal profession roll their eyes because an abused woman goes back to him, or when child protection move in to remove her children, when doctors think there's no point in talking to an abused woman about the impact of violence, this is all the impact of not recognising coercive control. So for those of you that still are unsure about whether criminalisation is necessary, I want you to do this for me. So let's imagine that your kid goes to school and every single day, no kid will play with them. No kid invites them to parties. The other kids call them ugly and stupid. Let's say they say this every single day. They steal your child's lunch. They pick on them. They are picked last for team sports. And let's say every single day your kid comes home crying. And every single day they are too scared to go back to school and are not learning anymore. Let's say your kid starts to change. From being happy little kids, they become quiet and anxious, terrified, and they stop telling you about what's happening at school. Let's say that one day a kid puts their foot out and deliberately trips your kid over and they graze their knee. You decide enough is enough. You go to the school and you show them your kid's knee and you tell them what you know, and the teacher says, I don't want to know. I just want to see the knee. I want a doctor's report. They ask you, how do I know that she didn't hit her knee at home? How do you know that she didn't mean to be tripped over? We need to focus only on whether the kid stuck his foot out on purpose. And we're going to do that by asking that kid. So she does this. She asks him, did you stick your foot out on purpose? And he says, no, it was an accident. The teacher is not at all interested in all the other things that have happened. They are not interested in any of the name-calling, the isolation, the degradation, the humiliation. They are only interested in the graze and what proof there is. The teacher then says, your kid's a liar, and also very clumsy, and it was probably their own fault that they fell. So I want to ask you all, in the case of this child, what aspect of bullying do you think causes the child the most lasting damage? What was the aspect that was the most traumatizing? And does anyone here believe that it's the grazed knee that formed a scab and healed over in days? Or was it the sustained fear, the lack of safety, the lack of support, the being disbelieved, the fact that the bully simply just said, I didn't do it, and was believed? We need to remember that this government treats domestic violence just like that. For those of us that want to criminalise coercive control, we are saying that we want women to be able to talk about the fear, the isolation from supports, the lack of money, the degradation, the humiliation. We want women to be able to use all of these things as evidence if they want to. We want women to be able to submit bank statements, text messages, reports from family and friends. We want women to be able to recognise that what is happening to her in private and is not okay, and that what is happening to her is currently out of reach by the law. We want women to be able to have access to charges that truly reflect the experience of abuse at home, to be able to have a government that recognises the terror she is experiencing and recognise that it is not the resultant injury, it is not the black eye, the lacerations that cause the trauma, but to live in a world that can recognise her experience as a common one, and one that does cause trauma, and one that does deserve the same compassion and care as other traumatised people. A world that recognises that these behaviours and provides an avenue for justice. Thank you.